The morning sun blazed over the military base as Sarah Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead. She had been working as a weapons technician for 3 years, but the desert heat never got easier. Her job was simple but crucial: restocking ammunition for the Apache helicopters that protected their operations in the Middle East. Sarah grabbed another box of 30mm rounds from the supply truck. These bullets were heavy, each one designed to pierce through enemy armor. She had loaded thousands of them over the years, working with steady hands and complete focus. The pilots trusted her work completely, knowing their lives depended on properly loaded weapons. As she worked, Sarah noticed a new pilot walking toward his helicopter. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. She had never seen him before, which was unusual since she knew most of the flight crew on the base. "You must be the new pilot everyone's been talking about," Sarah called out, setting down her tools for a moment. The pilot turned and smiled. "That's right. Captain Jake Morrison. Just transferred from Fort Campbell. And you are?" Node. Sarah Martinez, weapons tech. "I'll be taking care of your Apache today." She gestured toward the helicopter she was working on. "This bird will be ready to fly in about 20 minutes. Jake nodded and walked closer to inspect her work. Sarah noticed he moved differently than other pilots. More carefully, like someone who had seen serious combat. His eyes checked every detail of the helicopter, from the rotor blades to the weapon systems. "You do good work," Jake said, watching as Sarah secured another ammunition belt. "How long have you been doing this?" 3 years now. Started right after technical school." Sarah paused to wipe her hands on a rag. "What about you? Where did you fly before coming here?" "Afghanistan, mostly. Some classified missions I can't talk about." Jake's expression grew serious for a moment. "This heat reminds me of Kandahar." Sarah continued working while they talked. She enjoyed meeting the pilots and learning about their experiences. Most were friendly and appreciated the work she did to keep them safe in the air. As she reached up to load rounds into the helicopter's cannon, her sleeve rolled up slightly. Jake was standing nearby, still watching her work, when something caught his attention. His relaxed expression suddenly changed to one of complete shock. "Where did you get that tattoo?" Jake's voice had become sharp and urgent. Sarah looked down at her exposed wrist, confused by his sudden change in tone. "What tattoo? You mean this one?" She pulled her sleeve up a little more, revealing a small black symbol on her inner wrist. Jake's face went pale. He stared at the mark like he had seen a ghost. The symbol was simple but distinctive: 3 interlocking circles with a small star in the center. To most people, it would look like decorative artwork, but Jake knew exactly what it meant. "How long have you had that?" Jake demanded, his friendly demeanor completely gone. "Since I was 18. It's just something I got with some friends back home." Sarah was getting worried by his reaction. "Why? What's wrong with it?" "Sarah." Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his radio and stepped away from her. Sarah could hear him speaking quietly but urgently to someone on the other end. She caught words like security and immediate, but couldn't make out the full conversation. When Jake finished his call, he walked back over to Sarah. His expression was now completely professional and cold. "I need you to finish loading those rounds and then report to the security office immediately," Jake said firmly. "Don't go anywhere else, and don't talk to anyone about our conversation." "What's going on? Did I do something wrong?" Sarah's heart was starting to race. She had never been in trouble before and couldn't understand what was happening. "Just follow my instructions. The security office will explain everything." Sarah's hands were shaking slightly as she finished loading the last of the ammunition. Her mind was racing with possibilities. Why would her tattoo cause such a reaction? It was just a design she and her college roommates had gotten together during spring break. They thought it looked cool and mysterious. As she secured the final ammunition belt, Sarah tried to remember everything she could about getting the tattoo. She and 3 friends had walked into a tattoo parlor in Miami Beach. The artist had a book of symbols, and they each picked one that looked interesting. Sarah chose hers because she liked how the circles connected together. Jake watched every move she made, never taking his eyes off her. Other personnel on the flight line were starting to notice something was wrong. Sarah could see them whispering and pointing in her direction. "Finished," Sarah announced, closing the ammunition compartment. Her voice sounded strange, even to herself. "Good. Now head straight to Building 7. Ask for Lieutenant Colonel Davis. He's expecting you." Jake's tone remained formal and commanding. Sarah gathered her tools with trembling hands. She had no idea what was waiting for her at the security office, but Jake's reaction told her it was serious. As she walked away from the helicopter, she could feel his eyes following her every step. The walk to Building 7 felt like the longest of her life. Other soldiers she passed gave her curious looks, somehow sensing that something was wrong. Sarah tried to appear normal, but her mind was spinning with fear and confusion. Building 7 was a plain, concrete structure that housed the base's security operations. Sarah had never been inside before. The armed guards at the entrance checked her identification carefully before allowing her to enter. The interior was sterile and cold, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sarah approached the reception desk, where a stern-looking sergeant sat behind bulletproof glass. "I'm looking for Lieutenant Colonel Davis," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I was told to report here immediately." The sergeant looked at a list on his desk. "Martinez. Sarah. Technical Sergeant. Yes. He's waiting for you. Through that door and down the hall. Third office on the right." Sarah walked down a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. She could hear muffled conversations coming from some of the offices, but couldn't make out any words. When she reached the third door, she knocked twice. "Enter," came a voice from inside. Sarah opened the door to find a middle-aged officer sitting behind a metal desk. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was a serious-looking man, with gray hair and intense blue eyes. The office was small and windowless, with nothing on the walls except official military regulations. "Sergeant Martinez, please take a seat." Davis gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I understand you had an interesting conversation with Captain Morrison this morning." "Yes, sir, but I don't understand what this is about." Sarah sat down, trying to remain calm despite her growing fear. Davis opened a file folder and pulled out several photographs. He placed them on the desk where Sarah could see them clearly. The photos showed the same symbol that was tattooed on her wrist. 3 interlocking circles with a star in the center. "Do you recognize these images, Sergeant Martinez?" Sarah looked at the photos carefully. They showed the symbol in various locations, carved into walls, painted on vehicles, and drawn on documents. Some of the photos looked old, while others appeared more recent. "It's the same as my tattoo," Sarah admitted. "But I don't understand what these pictures are showing." Davis leaned back in his chair and studied Sarah's face carefully. "That symbol, Sergeant Martinez, is the identification mark used by a highly classified intelligence network. A network that hasn't been active for over 20 years. Sarah felt her stomach drop. "But that's impossible." "Tell me exactly how you came to choose this particular symbol," Davis instructed. "Every detail you can remember." As Sarah began to recount the story of her spring break tattoo, she had no idea that her simple choice of body art was about to unravel a mystery that had puzzled intelligence agencies for decades. The symbol on her wrist was connected to secrets that some people had killed to protect, and others had died trying to expose. Outside the security building, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office, staring at a classified file he had just retrieved from a locked safe. The file contained everything the military knew about the mysterious symbol and the network it represented. As he read through the documents, Jake realized that Sarah Martinez might be the key to solving one of the most important puzzles in modern intelligence history. The question was whether she was an innocent victim who had stumbled into something dangerous, or whether her presence on the base was part of a carefully planned operation that had been 20 years in the making. Lieutenant Colonel Davis closed the file and looked directly at Sarah. She could see that he was trying to decide whether to trust her or treat her as a potential threat. The silence in the room stretched on until Sarah felt she had to speak. "Sir, I promise I had no idea this symbol meant anything special. My friends and I just thought it looked cool." Davis picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Bring in the Mitchell file," he said quietly. After hanging up, he turned his attention back to Sarah. "Sergeant Martinez, I'm going to share some classified information with you. The reason is simple. You're already involved, whether you know it or not. What I tell you cannot leave this room." A knock at the door interrupted them. Another officer entered and handed Davis a thick manila folder before leaving without saying a word. Davis opened the folder and pulled out an old black and white photograph. "This picture was taken in 1943, Davis explained, sliding the photo across the desk. "During World War II, Allied intelligence created a network of deep cover agents in Nazi-occupied Europe. They used this symbol to identify each other." Sarah stared at the photograph. It showed a resistance fighter with the same 3 circles and star carved into a wooden post. But that was over 80 years ago. Exactly. The network was disbanded after the war ended. All agents were accounted for and debriefed. Or so we thought. Davis pulled out another document. In the 1,990 seconds, intelligence agencies around the world began noticing this symbol, appearing in connection with various unsolved mysteries. He showed Sarah a series of reports and photographs. The symbol had been found at crime scenes, in abandoned safe houses, and even carved into trees near secret military facilities. Each incident seemed unconnected, but the presence of the symbol suggested otherwise. "We believe someone maintained the network after the war, possibly for their own purposes, but we could never identify who or why." Davis leaned forward. "Until today, we had no leads. No way to trace the symbol to anyone still alive." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. "You think I'm connected to these people somehow? That's what we need to find out. Tell me about your family background. Where did your grandparents come from?" "My grandmother was from Europe originally. She came to America during the war, I think. But she died when I was young, and she never talked about her past." Sarah tried to remember anything her grandmother might have said about the war years. Davis made notes as she talked. "What was your grandmother's name? Do you know what country she came from?" "Elena Martinez." "Well, that was her married name. I think her maiden name was something German or Austrian. My grandfather told me once, but I can't remember exactly." Davis opened his laptop and began typing. Within minutes, he was pulling up immigration records and historical documents. His expression grew more serious as he read. "Elena Richter arrived in New York in 1944. Listed as a war refugee from Austria." Davis turned the laptop screen so Sarah could see. According to these records, she was processed through a special program for displaced persons with intelligence value. Sarah stared at the immigration document that showed her grandmother's photo and information. "What does that mean? Intelligence value? It means your grandmother probably worked with Allied intelligence during the war. The special program was used to relocate agents and informants who needed new identities for their safety." The pieces were starting to come together, but Sarah still couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So you think my grandmother was a spy?" "It's possible. And if she was part of the original network, she might have passed information to family members before she died. Information that could include the meaning of that symbol." Davis pulled out his radio and called for Captain Morrison to join them. Within 5 minutes, Jake entered the office, carrying his own set of files. "Captain, Sergeant Martinez has been very cooperative. I've briefed her on the basic situation." Davis gestured for Jake to sit down. "Now I need to explain why this discovery is so urgent." Jake opened his file and pulled out a recent intelligence report. 3 days ago, satellite surveillance detected unusual activity at an abandoned facility in Syria. The building had been empty for years, but suddenly there were vehicles and personnel moving in and out. He showed Sarah aerial photographs of the facility. Even from high altitude, she could see the familiar symbol painted in large letters on the roof of the main building. We believe this network, whatever it has become, is planning something significant. The timing can't be a coincidence. Just as tensions are rising in the region, they decide to reveal themselves. Jake pointed to different areas of the photographs. These vehicles contain sophisticated communications equipment. They're coordinating something big. Davis took over the explanation. The problem is, we know almost nothing about their current capabilities or intentions. The original network was created to fight the Nazis. But what is their purpose now? Are they still working for the Allies? Or have they become something else entirely? Sarah looked back and forth between the two officers. But how does my tattoo help with any of this? Your grandmother might have left clues about the network's current leadership or plans, Jake explained. Family documents, letters, anything that seemed unimportant at the time but could be crucial now. I don't have anything like that. When my grandmother died, my grandfather threw away most of her old papers. He said, looking at them made him too sad. Davis and Jake exchanged glances. What about your grandfather? Is he still alive? He died 5 years ago. But, Sarah paused, remembering something. He had a storage unit, where he kept some of my grandmother's things. My mom inherited it. But she's never gone through everything inside. Where is this storage unit? Davis asked urgently. Back home in Texas. My mom lives in San Antonio. Sarah was getting overwhelmed by how quickly everything was moving. Are you saying I need to go there? Not just you, Jake said. This is now a matter of national security. We'll need to examine everything in that storage unit, and we'll need to do it immediately. Davis picked up his phone again. I'm arranging emergency leave for you, Sergeant Martinez. You and Captain Morrison will fly to Texas tonight. A full intelligence team will meet you there. Sarah's head was spinning. Just that morning, she had been doing her regular job, thinking about nothing more complicated than the base cafeteria's lunch menu. Now she was apparently connected to an international intelligence mystery that could affect national security. What if we don't find anything useful in the storage unit? She asked. Then we'll have to find another way to track down this network, Davis replied. But right now, you're our only lead. Your grandmother's past might be the key to understanding what's happening in Syria and preventing whatever they're planning. Jake closed his files and stood up. We need to move fast. Intelligence suggests the activity in Syria is building towards something happening within the next few days. As Sarah signed paperwork for her emergency leave, she couldn't help thinking about her grandmother. Elena had always seemed like a quiet, gentle woman who spent her time gardening and cooking for the family. The idea that she might have been involved in international espionage seemed impossible. But as Sarah remembered her grandmother's sharp eyes and the way she sometimes spoke quietly in a language that wasn't Spanish or English, she began to wonder if there had been more to Elena Martinez than anyone in the family had realized. Within hours, Sarah found herself on a military transport plane heading for Texas. Sitting next to a man she had just met who apparently knew secrets that could change everything. As the plane flew through the night sky, she stared out the window and wondered what other surprises were waiting for her in her grandmother's carefully hidden past. The storage unit in San Antonio contained boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. Whatever was inside might solve a mystery that had puzzled intelligence agencies for years. Or it might lead Sarah and Jake into danger that neither of them was prepared to face. But one thing was certain. The symbol on Sarah's wrist had connected her to something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined possible. The storage facility in San Antonio was busy even in the early morning hours. Sarah and Jake arrived with a team of intelligence specialists who had flown in from various government agencies. Sarah's mother, Maria, met them at the entrance with keys and a worried expression. I still don't understand why Sarah's old tattoo has anything to do with government business, Maria said as she unlocked the metal door of Unit 247. We'll explain everything once we know more, Jake assured her. For now, we just need to examine your mother-in-law's belongings. The storage unit was packed with boxes, furniture, and personal items that had been carefully preserved for decades. Sarah recognized some of her grandmother's furniture and dishes, but most of the contents were unfamiliar to her. Agent Rebecca Torres, the lead intelligence specialist, began organizing the search. "We're looking for documents, photographs, letters, or anything that might contain coded information. Given the time period, pay attention to anything from the 1,940 seconds through the 1,960 seconds." Sarah and her mother started opening boxes while the agents set up equipment to photograph and catalog everything they found. Most of the early boxes contained ordinary household items, dishes, clothing, and books in both Spanish and English. It was Jake who made the first significant discovery. In a box labeled Elena's Sewing, he found a wooden jewelry box with a false bottom. When he pressed on one corner, the bottom panel slid away to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside were 3 items: a small black notebook with text in multiple languages, a photograph of several people in 1,940 seconds clothing, and a metal object that looked like an old-fashioned compass. "Sarah, you need to see this," Jake called out. Sarah hurried over and looked at the photograph Jake was holding. It showed her grandmother as a much younger woman, standing with 4 other people in front of what looked like a European building. All 5 people in the photo had the symbol tattooed on their wrists, in the exact same location as Sarah's tattoo. Agent Torres examined the photograph with a magnifying glass. "This confirms that your grandmother was definitely part of the original network. Look at the background. That building is the old intelligence headquarters in Vienna." Sarah's mother gasped. "My mother-in-law never told us any of this. She always said she came from a farming family." The notebook was even more revealing. Elena had written detailed entries in a code that mixed German, English, and numbers. Agent Torres photographed each page while a cryptographer worked on translation using a portable computer. The early entries are from 1,943 and 1,944, the cryptographer announced after working through several pages. They describe intelligence, gathering operations, and safe house locations. But the later entries are different. That's not report." "What do you mean different?" Jake asked. "She was documenting something that happened after the war." According to this, some members of the network refused to disband. They wanted to continue operations for their own purposes. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The cryptographer continued reading. "Elena was apparently keeping track of these rogue agents. She believed they were planning to use wartime intelligence networks for personal profit, selling information, smuggling operations, things like that." Agent Torres took over the examination of the metal compass-like object. When she opened it, instead of a compass needle, it contained a series of small symbols arranged in a circle. Each symbol could be rotated independently. "This is a cipher wheel," Torres explained. "It would have been used to encode and decode messages. If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to read more of your grandmother's notes." As the team continued working through Elena's belongings, they found more evidence of her continuing intelligence work after the war. She had been tracking the activities of former network members who had gone rogue, documenting their operations, and trying to warn authorities about their activities. The breakthrough came when they found a sealed envelope hidden inside the lining of an old coat. The envelope contained current maps and photographs, clearly taken within the last few years. "Your grandmother was still active much more recently than we thought," Agent Torres told Sarah. "These photos show the same facility in Syria that we've been monitoring. She somehow knew about their current operations." Jake studied the maps carefully. "Look at these markings. She's identified what she believes are their primary targets. The targets were sobering: key military installations, government communication centers, and civilian infrastructure in 3 different countries. Whatever the rogue network was planning, it was designed to cause maximum disruption across a wide area. But the most shocking discovery was in the final envelope they opened. It contained a recent letter, addressed to Sarah, written in Elena's handwriting, and dated just 6 months before her death. "My dear granddaughter," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means the symbol I taught you to draw as a child has led others to discover our family's secret. I had hoped this day would never come, but I prepared for it nonetheless." Sarah's hands shook as she continued reading aloud. "The tattoo you chose to get with your friends was not a coincidence. I influenced your decision by showing you that symbol throughout your childhood, hoping that if danger ever came, it would identify you as family to those who could protect you. She planned this," Maria whispered. Elena knew Sarah would get that tattoo. The letter continued with detailed instructions for accessing additional hidden information and contact details for trusted allies who were still monitoring the rogue network. Elena had spent decades building a counterintelligence operation to track and ultimately stop the former agents who had betrayed their original mission. The current leadership of the rogue network is planning what they call Operation Sunrise. Sarah read. They intend to simultaneously attack multiple targets to create chaos and blame it on terrorist organizations. Their goal is to profit from the resulting political instability by selling their services to the highest bidders. Jake immediately got on his radio to relay this information to command headquarters. Within minutes, he was speaking directly with senior officials who were coordinating an international response. Agent Torres found the final piece of the puzzle in Elena's cipher wheel. When properly aligned, it decoded a series of numbers that corresponded to coordinates and timing for the planned attacks. Operation Sunrise is scheduled to begin in 18 hours, Torres announced. The attacks are coordinated across 3 time zones, designed to maintain constant pressure and prevent effective response. Sarah looked at her grandmother's photograph again, seeing Elena in a completely new light. The quiet woman who had made her favorite cookies and taught her to garden had actually been a guardian, protecting the world from people who would have used their wartime training for evil purposes. "What happens now?" Sarah asked Jake. "Now we prevent those attacks from happening. Thanks to your grandmother's work, we know exactly where to find them and how to stop them." Jake smiled for the first time since they had met. "Elena Martinez saved a lot of lives, and she made sure you could help us save even more." As military and intelligence forces around the world moved to intercept the rogue network's operations, Sarah finally understood why her grandmother had always told her that some secrets were worth keeping, and some fights were worth continuing even when others wanted to give up. The symbol on her wrist was no longer just a tattoo. It was a reminder of a legacy of courage and sacrifice that had protected innocent people for over 80 years. And now it was Sarah's turn to carry that legacy forward. 6 months later, Sarah received a commendation for her role in preventing Operation Sunrise. She also received a new assignment, working with an international task force dedicated to tracking down the remaining members of rogue intelligence networks. Her grandmother's quiet war was finally over, but Sarah's own mission was just beginning. Every time she looked at her tattoo, she remembered Elena's words. "Some fights are too important to ever truly end. We just pass the responsibility to those who come after us." The Apache helicopter that started it all still sat on the flight line, ready for its next mission. But now Sarah knew that some battles were fought not in the sky, but in the shadows, by ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things when the world needed protecting.